Happy Halloween, everybody.
Hello there. Welcome to my review of Phantasm 2 as part of my Halloween sequel series. The film was written and directed by Don Coscarelli, who was also responsible for the original film, and I have to say, I do feel for him. Like Sam Raimi, he had an early hit with a low-budget horror film of incredible vision and imagination, but when it came time to make his sequel, he received far more studio interference than Raimi, and was forced to recast one of the leads. James LeGros takes on the role of Mike Pearson here, previously played by A. Michael Baldwin. And don't get me wrong, he does a great job, but with Coscarelli making 3 further sequels with Baldwin returning to the role, it does feel like a bit of an anomaly. It also feels like Coscarelli has never quite had the budget to fulfill his ambitions in the Phantasm series, with the exception of this film. So while the scope of the films increases with each instalment to a, quite frankly, massive scale, the later sequels feel like they are lacking the money to fully realise that scope. This film, coming so many years after the first, and carrying on directly from the first film, should have been as successful and impactful as Evil Dead 2. But it was not a box office success, perhaps due to its scale of world building, its general weirdness, and its vastly increased budget. But despite all that, it did find its audience eventually, and demonstrates some of the most imaginative story elements I've seen in a film. In some respect, it's the Dune or Lord of the Rings of horror, in the way that the roots of the story spread far and wide. The plot of this film sees a psychic young woman, Liz, played by Paula Irvine, having visions of Mike and the villainous tall man, seemingly learning all about what happened to Mike and Reggie in the first film, which is an excellent storytelling device for recapping the first film. It's now years later, and Mike has been institutionalized, with everybody, including Reggie, thinking he hallucinated the whole thing. After being released, he convinces Reggie it's all real, after the tall man kills Reggie's entire family.
Mitch, we gotta get the people out of your house, man. The gas in there's gonna go up and it's gonna blow!
And they go on the road to hunt the tall man down. Reggie arming himself with his now famous quadruple barrel shotgun. Meanwhile, Liz's family is killed by the tall man, as Reggie and Mike finally arrive with a hitchhiking woman named Alchemy in tow. The tall man captures Liz, and Mike and Reggie set about rescuing her from the town mortuary. They escape in a hearse Alchemy has acquired and head off, but Alchemy is not all she seems, and the nightmare is far from over. But this chapter certainly is.
Listen to me. This is not happening. We're gonna wake up. It's a dream.
It's only a dream.
No, it's not.
Introducing Liz as a psychic, having visions of Mike's past, is a brilliant way to catch people up on the story that ended on a cliffhanger, and while it's a bit cheeky to end this one on a cliffhanger too, especially as there was a gap of 8 years between the first film and this one, it feels less cheap than when a slasher movie has the killer return for one last scare, because of the world we're in. The supernatural world Coscarelli has created in his Phantasm universe is so odd that it lends itself to this sort of ending much more than one where the villain has been presented as human. In some ways, Phantasm 2 is almost an experimental art house film of a horror movie, with some very typical 80s horror movie cliches, such as blood and gore, jump scares and superfluous nudity. But it also has long, lingering shots of Liz walking through the halls of a columbarium, or Mike and Reggie silently driving through desolate landscape that has more in common with German Expressionism than 80s monster movies. It also never explains too much, which can be frustrating at times, as we never really figure out why any of this is happening. What we do know is that the tall man is harvesting the dead and making them undead for nefarious purposes. There's also, of course, the infamous silver, or as we see in this film, gold flying orbs, which contain a variety of different lethal weapons. The silver orbs are an ingenious way of introducing novel and terrifying death scenes, and a lesser filmmaker might have used them less sparingly than Coscarelli. But considering how they are one of the most memorable elements of the first film, they barely make an appearance here, not arriving until near the hour mark, which makes it all the more terrifying when they do. The pacing does take some getting used to, as there is a lot of setup, with Mike and Reggie not really doing much more than travelling to find Liz for a large portion of the movie, as we see her encounter the tall man, and lose her whole family in the process. The small cast of unnerving inhabitants of her town really give this an eerie and otherworldly feel, as if the apocalypse has already happened, but no one has been told about it. The only fully formed character we meet, in addition to the ones I've already mentioned, is Kenneth Teagar's priest, who knows at least some of what is going on, yet is trying desperately to fool himself that it's not. He gives a brief but unsettling performance that I think goes some way to explain what Phantasm 2 is all about. How bad things can get when you decide to look away, so often that you stop noticing when really awful things start happening. The tall man operates with impunity, turning one small town after another into a ghost town, because no one really cares until it's too late. At the time the film was made, America was seeing this in action, not from a supernatural force, but through big businesses opening giant shopping malls and hypermarkets, driving local businesses to shut, while people's jobs were moving from where they lived to bigger towns and cities. While that's not all the film is about, that's certainly an element of the subtext. I can understand why this film isn't for everyone. It has a somewhat leisurely pace, is very quiet, and doesn't explain very much of anything, but I think those are its strengths. It has some of the conventions of horror films I've already mentioned, as well as car chases, stunts, and heroic moments, but it also sets itself apart by being different and original, and manages to keep the tension up, because you don't know what insanity is about to ensue, and the film certainly delivers on that insanity. In the final act, as the inevitable death of the priest signals the beginning of absolute chaos, gore and horror that I'm sure some will have been waiting the whole film for. The tall man remains terrifying throughout, played to perfection by Angus Scrimm, who manages to give character to an unstoppable alien, something or other. Whether he's acting normally,
Graveside service is about to begin,
or in full villain mode, he remains completely believable. He's probably one of cinema's greatest unappreciated villains in one of cinema's greatest unappreciated franchises. If you are looking for something different this Halloween, a more thoughtful horror film, but one that also includes the copious gore that came with all 80s horror films, I would suggest you seek it out. It's not entirely necessary to see the first film, but I think it probably is worth seeing these in order. Thank you. Goodbye.